and welcome to this first look exploring session, our final session looking at A Warning for Fair Women, a play that we've so far been enjoying quite a lot. It's a true crime story. We don't know how true to the true crime the story is, but we shall see. It's certainly the murderers so far have been really incompetent, which suggests that it is probably quite accurate. You know, that none of this, the cunning plan that only a master genius can unfold after sitting down and smoking lots of tobacco or something. No. Here they just go. The one covered in blood did it. You know, and probably had accomplices. Let's go and ask some questions. To discover how the final act of the play runs, we have this wonderful crack team of readers who hopefully I will remember who they were, because all the parts have danced around doing a merry little tune in my head. So reading Fourth Lord, a Doctor and First Officer is...
Hello, my name is Lynn. I'm a teacher. I live in the northwestern United States.
Reading James Roger, the Brother and Will is...
Hello, I'm Sarah Blake. I'm an actor, writer and director based in Germany.
Reading Beane, Butcher, Second Lord and Sheriff is...
Hi, I'm Eric, and I do not do Morris dancing.
As indeed. Reading First Lord, Clerk, Minister and Keeper is...
Hi, Alan Scott, based in Suffolk.
Reading Tragedy, the Lord Mayor occasionally clashing with the Lord Justice is...
Aliki, Chapple, based in northwestern England.
And reading Browne's Both the Messengers, even in the same scene, and Drury is...
Lalitte, I'm also a teacher, practically in Paris.
And reading Barnes, Anne, Tom, and Second Officer is...
Rachel Moles, I'm in Italy, also not a Morris dancer.
Yes, and I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I'm not a Morris dancer either. But I do have bells. I will be reading stage directions and generally moving things forward in a general forwardy kind of direction. I did go through everyone, didn't I? Yes, I did. So, without further ado, let's go to the dumb show before Act 4. Enter Tragedy for the show.
Prevailing sin, having by 3 degrees made his ascension to forbidden deeds, as first, alluring their unwary minds to like what she proposed, then practising to draw them to consent, and last of all ministering fit means and opportunity to execute what she approved good, now she unveils their sight, and lets them see the horror of their foul immanity, and wrath that all this while hath been obscured steps forward before them in 1,000 shapes of ghastly thoughts and loathing discontents, so that the rest was promised now appears unrest, and deep affliction of the soul delight proves danger, confidence despair, and by this following show shall more appear.
Enter Justice and Mercy, when, having taken their seats, Justice falls into a slumber. Then enters wronged Chastity, and in dumb action uttering her grief to Mercy is put away. Whereupon she wakens Justice, who, listening her attentively, starts up, commanding his officers to attend her. Then go they with her, and fetch forth Master Sanders' body, Mistress Sanders, Drury, and Roger led after it, and being shown it, they all seem very sorrowful, and are led away. But Chastity shows that the chief officer is not as yet taken, whereon Justice dispatcheth his servant Diligence to make further inquiry after the murderer, and so they depart the stage with Chastity.
Thus lawless actions and prodigious crimes drink not the blood alone of them they hate, but even their ministers, when they have done all that they can, must help to fill the scene, and yield their guilty necks unto the block, for which intent the wronged Chastity, prostrate before the sacred throne of justice, with wringing hands, and cheeks besprent with tears, pursues the murderers, and being heard, of mercy first, that in relenting words would fain persuade her to humility, she turns from her, and with her tender hand wakes slumbering justice, when her tale being told, and the dead body brought for instance forth, straight inquisition and searches made, and the offenders, as you did behold, discovered where they thought to be unseen. Then trial now remains, as shall conclude measure for measure, and lost blood for blood.
And exuent tragedy. I'm interested here because I can sort of figure out how you're going to demonstrate justice and chastity and things. But I do wonder what the visual signifiers for diligence are. I'm sure they had some shorthand at the time left over from morality traditions and art and things, and I'm sure people who know about this kind of thing in visual art might know. And I'm not expecting any serious answers now. But I'm interested on those visual signifiers for things, how that comes across. Because I don't think tragedy ever says the name diligence. Mercy, yes. I say chastity and justice are quite straightforward. But yeah, a less bloody dumb show this time. No gore. Much more straightforward. Thoughts from the room, Eric?
Yeah, I was going to say that it's obviously less bloody because they wasted all the blood the first time around. Well, second time around, rather. But also, what I was going to say was the way Aliki was reading it just made me think it could be read in a sort of, the little dead girl Lenore kind of style, which would be hilarious, but also really disturbing.
Well, considering how the play opened with tragedy, arguing with comedy and history about who had right to own the stage, that would make that opening scene quite different, I think. Any other thoughts on this particular dumb show before we get into the meat of the play? No one has anything. It's still the beginning of the session. Let's get our juices flowing with Act 4, Scene 1 then. Enter George Browne and one Browne, another Browne, who is a butcher in Rochester.
"'Tis marvel, cousin Browne, we see you here, and thus alone, without all company. You were not wont to visit Rochester, but you had still some friend or other with you."
Such is the occasion, cousin, at this time, and for the love I bear you, I am bold to make myself your guest, rather than lie in any public inn, because, indeed, the house where I was wont to host is full of certain Frenchmen and their followers.
"Nay, cousin Browne, I would not have you think I do object thus much, as one unwilling to show you any kindness that I can. My house, though homely, yet such as it is, and I myself will be at your command. I love you for your name's sake, and trust me, sir, I am proud that such a one as you will call me cousin, though I am sure we are no kin at all."
Yes, cousin, we are kin, nor do I scorn at any time to acknowledge as much towards men of baser calling than yourself.
"It may be so, sir, but to tell you the truth, it seemed somewhat strange to me at first, and I was half afraid some ill had happened that made you careful whom you trusted to."
Faith, cousin, none but this. I owe some money, and one I'm indebted to of late hath brought his action to an outlawry, and seeks to do me all extremity, but that I'm not yet provided for him. But that I'm not yet provided for him, and that he shall not have his will of me, I do absent me till a friend of mine do see what order he may take with him.
"How now, who is this?"
Enter Master Mayor. We have different mayors across the sequence, but they're all going to be played by the same person. Enter Master Mayor, Master James, with a pursuivant and others.
Where are you, neighbour Browne?
"Master Mayor, you're welcome. What's the news, sir? You come so guarded. Is there aught amiss?"
Heaven will have justice shown. It is even so.
I can assure you 'tis the man we seek. Then do your office, Master Mayor.
George Browne, I do arrest you in Her Highness' name as one suspected to have murdered George Sanders, citizen of London.
Of murder, sir? There lives not in this land can touch me with the thought of murder.
Pray God it be so. But you must along before their honours there to answer it. Here's a commission that commands it so.
Well, sir, I do obey, and do not doubt but I shall prove me innocent therein.
Come, Master Mayor, it is the council's pleasure. You must assist us till we come to Woolwich, where we have order to confer at large with Master Barnes concerning this mishap.
With all my heart. Farewell, good neighbour Browne.
God keep you, Master Mayor, and all the rest. And Master Browne, believe me, I'm sorry it was your fortune to have no more grace.
Cousin, grieve not for me. My case is clear. Suspected men may be, but need not fear.
And they exit. We'll go straight on into Act 4, Scene 2, which features a John Beane brought in a chair. For those who weren't here last time, he has been stabbed 10 times. And Master Barnes and Master James. Is that the same Master James who was in the previous scene? Interesting. Anyway, these are on stage. Barnes, take it away.
Sir, how much I esteemed this gentleman, and in how high respect I held his love, my griefs can hardly utter.
It shall not need. Your love after his death expresses it.
I would to God it could. And I'm very glad my lords of her most honourable council have made choice of yourself, so grave a gentleman, to see the manner of this cruel murder.
Sir, the most unworthy I, of many men, but that in the high bounty of your kindness so you term me. But trust me, Master Barnes, among the rest that was reported to them of the murder, they hardly were induced to believe that this poor soul, having so many wounds, and all so mortal as they were reported, with so much loss of blood, should possibly yet live. Why, it is past belief.
Sir, it is so. Your worthy self can witness, as strange to us that look upon the wretch as the report thereof unto their wisdoms.
More fearful wounds, nor hurts more dangerous, upon my faith I have not seen.
Hey ho, a little drink? Oh, my head.
Good John, how doest thou?
Who's that, Father John?
Nay, John, thy master.
Lord, my belly.
He spends more breath that issues through his wounds than through his lips.
I'm dry.
John, doest thou know me?
See where thy master is. Look, dost thou know him?
Sir, he never had his perfect memory since the first hour.
Surely he cannot last.
And yet, sir, to our seeming, I assure you, he sat not up so strongly as you see him, since he was brought into this house as now.
'Tis very strange.
Enter the Mayor of Rochester with Browne and officers.
As I take it, Master Mayor of Rochester.
The same, good Master Barnes.
What happy fortune sent you here to Woolwich, that yet your company may give us comfort in this sad time?
Believe me, sad indeed, and very sad. Sir, the council's warrant lately came to me about the search for one Captain George Browne, as it should seem suspected for this murder, whom in my search I happened to apprehend, and hearing that the bodies of the murdered remained here, I thought it requisite to make this in my way unto the court, now going thither with the prisoner.
Believe me, sir, you've done right good service, and shown yourself a painful gentleman, and shall no doubt deserve well of the state.
No doubt you shall. And I durst assure you so, the council will accept well of the same.
Good Master Mayor, this wretched man of mine is not yet dead. Look you where he sits, but past all sense, and labouring to his end.
Alas, poor wretch.
Is this that Browne that is suspected to have done the murder? A goodly man, believe me, too fair a creature for so foul an act.
My name is Browne, sir.
I know you well. Your fortunes have been fair as any gentleman's of your repute. But, Browne, should you be guilty of this fact, as this your fight hath given shrewd suspicion, oh, Browne, your hands have done the bloodiest deed that ever was committed.
He doth not live dare charge me with it.
Pray God there be not.
Sergeants, bring him near. See if this poor soul know him.
Cannot be. These 2 days' space he knew no creature.
Swoons, lives the villain yet? Oh, how his very sight affrights my soul. His very eyes will speak had he no tongue, and will accuse me.
See how his wounds break out afresh in bleeding.
Stirs himself.
He openeth his eyes.
See how he looks upon him.
I gave him 15 wounds, which now be 15 mouths that do accuse me. In every wound there is a bloody tongue, which will all speak, though he hold his peace. By a whole jury shall I be accused.
John, dost thou hear? Knowest thou this man?
Yea, 'tis he that murdered me and Master Saunders.
And he sinks down.
Oh, hold him up.
John, comfort thyself.
Bow him. Give him air.
No, he is dead.
Methinks he is so fearful in my sight, that were he now but where I saw him last, for all this world I would not look on him.
The wondrous work of God, that this poor creature, not speaking for 2 days, yet now should speak to accuse this man, and presently yield up his soul.
Court thereof can seem no less unto the lords.
Sergeants, away, prepare you for the court, and I will follow you immediately.
Sure, the revealing of this murther's strange.
It is so, sir. But in the case of blood, God's justice hath been still miraculous.
I have heard it told that digging up a grave wherein a man had 20 years been buried, by finding of a nail knocked in the scalp, by due inquiry who was buried there, the murder yet at length did come to light.
I have heard it told that once a traveller, being in the hands of him that murdered him, told him the fern that then grew in the place, if nothing else, yet that would sure reveal him. And 7 years later, being safe in London, there came a sprig of fern, borne by the wind to the room whereas the murderer was, at the sight whereof he suddenly start up, and then revealed the murder.
I'll tell you, sir, one more to quit your tale. A woman that had made away her husband, and sitting to behold a tragedy at Lynn, a town in Norfolk, acted by players travelling that way, wherein a woman that had murdered hers was ever haunted with her husband's ghost, the passion, written by a feeling pen and acted by a good tragedian, she was so moved with the sight thereof, as she cried out, the play was made by her, and openly confessed her husband's murder.
However, there's God's name be praised for this. You, Mayor, I see, must to the court. I pray you do my duty to the lords.
That I will, sir.
Come, I'll go along with you.
And they exit, and there will pause 2 very different scenes. And Boydar Beane, who's gained an extra 5 wounds since earlier in the play. I mean, I think that was the initial assessment by the pathologist. Just the doctor on the scene. When they got him back to, later on, they found another 5 wounds and there. Or in the heat of the moment, Browne couldn't count. He lost count. Once you get to 10, 10, 15, what are you going to go? But yeah, it was so, and he gets to, identify his murderer deathbed. He did it. He killed me. We get the sort of medieval blood, the wounds bleeding afresh moment from someone who's not dead yet, which suggests that actually the last thing you want to do is encounter your murderer if you're still alive, because you exsanguinate before him. It's an interesting continuity issue about James. Is the James who in the previous scene supposed to be the same James in this scene? In which case, how do we connect the 2 scenes? Because the 2 scenes don't connect. That's awkward. Thoughts from the room on that? Alan, then Sarah.
I think it probably is, and I think that you've travelled a relatively short distance, because James, as we had established in the earlier scene, that he's one of the officials of the court, and probably is the one who's been lumbered by the council with progressing the matter.
So he has the awkwardness of having to exit and come back on again, or they just deliver him the body in the chair. He remains on while the mayor exits, and the mayor then gets to enter again later. It's
messy.
awkward. It's doable. I mean, it's not. I see a very short music cue and a lighting change, and it's fine. But Sarah.
No, I was going to say I thought it was a different James, mainly for the reasons you just said. But yeah, I suppose if they brought the body to him, then, or not the body, he's still alive at that point. He feels
James has to know him in the previous scene because he's there to identify that it's the same person.
Exactly, yeah. He feels like a different character to me, but maybe that's just because of the way I'm reading him today. I mean, who read him? It's 2 days ago. My memory doesn't last that long. I can't remember. Maybe it's just because we're reading them different ways, but he does feel like a slightly different personality.
But that doesn't encountered James anything before.
Yes, we
Yeah,
have.
we had him.
Oh, yes, we did.
Yeah.
Rachel was James the other day.
Right.
Other day, yeah.
Okay.
He was the one that Browne blagged a drink off before he got
that's right.
spotted that he was blood spattered.
Yeah. He just feels like a more serious and on the case person, but then maybe that's just because I've decided to play him like a sort of detective type today. I don't know.
Anyway, it's a conundrum, but let's talk about the scenes themselves and things. Eric.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I mean, I'm bleeding out, and these guys are just standing there asking me questions. Who's who? And I'm like, what? No, this is not Guess Who. Come on, I'm dying here. No, yeah,
we've seen that in police dramas. Bring him out of the coma. We need to find out who did it.
Yeah,
it'll kill him. You can't interfere with my patient, Inspector. We've all heard that before. Aliki, did you want to leap in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite funny, especially since they I mean, not funny, obviously, the poor man's bleeding to death, but it's odd, especially given that everybody then goes about telling us how easy it is for dead bodies to identify their murderers. So we could have left the poor fellow alone, really.
He spends more breath that issues through his wounds than through his lips. I mean, that's a particularly grim line. It's just... I do like the way that the butcher, Butcher Browne, I mean, presumably they're related. That's why they have the same surname, which would make sense. But I just love the way he goes, I hope you haven't come up here because you're in trouble. And he goes, no, not covered in blood anymore. No, I'm fine. Sarah.
In debt.
Yeah.
I found that little bit really interesting, actually, because Browne was presented to us right at the beginning of the play as a gentleman, which would suggest he had some kind of landed property somewhere. And yet he has a cousin who's a butcher. Now, I know it could, depending on eldest sons who inherited and then second sons who didn't and whatever. But even so, that's quite a big difference. And also, yeah, the fact that the butcher's immediately like, oh, what do you need now, kind of thing, suggests to me that maybe he's the one who's, of the two of them, used to kind of having a more steady flow of income and being the more respectable one of the two. So I don't know, maybe has he been conning everybody this whole time and he's not a gentleman at all, or I don't know. I just found that quite interesting from us.
Well, he's described as captain, so I'd suggest that he's been adventuring off in Ireland. He's got some booty, and he's got a sudden rash of wealth. I don't think he ever places himself as a gentleman. He just places himself as someone with cash on hand. But or maybe sea trade. Maybe he's got some. Because he was talking about how he couldn't get his hand on any cash, so maybe he's got stuff out in boats off doing other things.
And it's other people, maybe he referred to him as a gentleman rather than himself. I can't remember now, but yeah.
Alan.
Also,
I must admit, right the way through, I've seen Browne as being a chancer and probably a bit of a con merchant. And I'm just wondering whether what's happened is he's on the lam trying to get away from the officers and has spotted this name Browne. Oh, right, well, I'll go and claim a cousin relationship which probably never existed.
I don't know if he has the wit for that. He's not. He's really bad at talking people round things. I mean, he can't. He couldn't woo Anne to save his life. I mean, she just told him to F off. That's why he ended up having to murder her husband. I don't think he's that kind of person at all. I'm really now interested in the real person as to what clues that would actually give to this person. Sorry, Lalitte.
So I was just going to say that captains seem to be a dodgy lot generally. I'm just thinking of Middleton's play. I think it's the Phoenix I read recently, and there's a captain obviously based on Middleton's father-in-law who actually sells his wife. And that seems to be a general kind of thing with captains being a bit kind of dodgy. So maybe Aaron's right.
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking that I just enjoyed the moment of the butcher going, "No, we're not related, are we? I mean, I don't really know you." So I'm kind of go away, creepy guy, who turns up by my door.
Well, they call each other cousin. Repeatedly. So.
Yeah. Also, I was intrigued by the fact that they kind of the play is titled "Warning for Fair Women," but we haven't seen the warning yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we might not want to go into that. That'll just be depressing. Anyway, we need to move forward into Act 4, Scene 3. This is where it may get a little confusing. There's a lot of lords coming on. There's two messengers, but they're going to be played by the same person. Anyway, enter the lords at the court and messengers.
Where was Browne apprehended, messenger?
At Rochester, my lord, in a butcher's house of his own name, and from thence brought up to Woolwich.
And there the fellow he left for dead with all those wounds affirmed that it was he.
He did, my lord, and with a constant voice prayed God forgive Browne and receive his soul, and so departed.
'Tis a wondrous thing that the power of heaven sustained him. A man with 9 or 10 such mortal wounds, not taking food, should live so many days, and then at the sight of Browne recover strength and speak so cheerily as they say he did.
Aye, and soon after he avouched the fact unto Browne's face, then to give up the ghost.
'Twas God's good will it should be so, my lord. But what said Browne? Did he deny the deed?
Never, my lord, but with tears lament, as seemed to us, his heinous cruelty.
When will they come?
Immediately, my lord, for they have wind and tide, and boats do wait.
Enter Master James.
My lords, the Mayor of Rochester is come with Browne.
Exit, Master James.
Let him come in. You, messenger, haste you to London to the justices. Will them from us seek an indictment drawn against George Browne for murdering of George Sanders.
Welcome, good Master Mayor of Rochester.
Indeed, enter the Mayor, Browne, a messenger, another, and Master Humphrey.
I humbly thank your honours.
We thank you for your great care and diligence in this and many other faithful services. Now, Master Browne, I am sorry it was your hap to be so far from grace and fear of God as to commit so bloody a murder. What say ye? Are ye not sorry for it?
Yes, my lord, and were it now to do, all the world's wealth could not entice me to it.
Was there any ancient quarrel round betwixt yourself and Master Sanders?
No.
Was it for the money that he had about him?
No, my good lord, I knew of none he had.
No, I heard an inkling of the cause. You did affect his wife, George Browne, too much.
I did, my lord, and God forgive it me.
Ooh, did I give out a third lord? Did I miss? Someone step in and be a third lord.
And she provoked you. I'm sorry. And she provoked you to dispatch him.
No.
Yes, and promised you should marry her?
No, I will take it upon my death.
Some other were confederate in the fact. Confess then, Browne, discharge thy conscience.
I will, my lord, at the hour of my death.
Nay, now that they with thee may die for it.
And Master James delivers a letter.
From whom this letter?
From the Sheriffs of London.
I told you Mistress Saunders had a hand was in. The acts confessed by two that she knew on it.
They do her wrong, my lords, upon my life.
Why, Drury's right, and Roger do affirm unto her face that she did consent.
God pardon them, they wrong the innocent. They both are guilty and procured the deed, and gave me money since the deed was done, £26 to carry me away. But Mistress Saunders, as I hope for heaven, is guiltless, ignorant how it was done. But Drury's wife did bear me still in hand. If he were dead, she should effect the marriage. And trusty Roger, her base apple squire, haunted me like a sprite till it was done, and now like devils accuse that harmless soul.
Well, Master Browne, we're sorry for your fall. You were a man respected of us all, and noted fit for many services. And fie that wanton lust should overthrow such gallant parts in any gentleman. Now all our favours cannot do ye good, the act's too odious to be spoken of. Therefore we must dismiss ye to the law.
Expect no life, but mediate of death, and for the safeguard of thy sinful soul, conceal no part of truth for friend or foe. And, Master Mayor, as you have taken pains to finish it and see him safe conveyed to the justice of the bench at Westminster, will them from us to try him speedily, that gentlemen shall go along with you, and take it in writing his confession.
Farewell, George Browne, discharge thy conscience.
I do, my lord, that Saunders' wife is clear.
And they exit. So we're setting up the legal wheels. We're setting up the question of complicity, which we brought up earlier, earlier in the play. That question of how much did Anne know? How much is Anne complicit with the crime? And that's exactly the case that we're now careering headlong into. And actually, as an audience, we don't quite know. We know that she was told about maybe we should murder your husband, but we don't know that she was involved any further than that. Drury and Roger. Roger made me do it, sir. He wouldn't leave me alone until I did the murder, honest. They've dobbed everybody else in it, so they're not going to go to their graves without taking as many other people down with them. Lovely people they are. Lovely. Thoughts from the room? Too many lords, in my opinion, by the way. I don't think we need 4 lords, especially as one of them only has one line. So few lines that I didn't even notice he existed. Lynn.
So we have the continued ambiguity of Anne Sanders' involvement here. Because we didn't see her make that conversion from "get out of my face, I'm not interested in you" to "oh, okay, I might consider accepting of your love." That when it was just a letter that we were told about. And now Drury and Roger said that she knew all about it, and Browne said no, she knew nothing, that she didn't think it was going to go this far. And I kind of hope we never do clear that up. I think it would be interesting if her level of complicity is never made clear to us as an audience.
The wheels are turning. This is sort of the arraignment stage. He's gone in to make a plea. We're going to go into trial, I think, next. Sarah.
I think as well, you've got to give props to the playwright for this, because there was some talk on Wednesday when we did part 2. When we read part 2 of the play, that it was like, why aren't we seeing these scenes? Why is all this being, created through a dumb show? This idea that she's going along with it, and it's not very clear, and it would have been really great to have seen these scenes where, you know, he actually seduces her and she agrees to have an affair with him, and how much does she know, and it's all a bit incomplete. And like now, haha, it's like there's a reason for that, because yeah, we all know what the crime is, we all know who committed the murder, we all know who done it, but we don't quite know who is implicated. So I think that's actually been a really clever choice on the part of the playwright to actually not put those scenes in early in, because I mean, clearly this is a playwright who is perfectly capable of writing those scenes, and now we know why they chose to leave them out.
Yes, because we are getting some lovely scenes, you know, and some scenes that are just doing, you know, more mechanical business, but, you know, genuinely harrowing and sad and funny, and they're really ringing the changes. I'm really liking whoever this is. I want to know who this is. Anyway, Aliki.
So, not having read the earlier part of the play, I'm really intrigued by the differences between just the few scenes we've seen here in what people say. Browne, in just the previous scene, said, no, I never murdered anybody. And now he's like, yeah, I did it. It was all down to me. And they helped me, but she didn't. And also we have this marvelous little detail where we actually heard Beane's dying words, which were fairly brief. It was him, he murdered us both, clunk. And now we get, yes, and then he prayed to God to forgive the sinner, that he might be saved, and then he died. No, he didn't. We know he didn't.
Yeah, it's the things getting slightly adjusted, and we've already talked about how many times was Beane stabbed. Was it 10? Was it 9? Or was it 15? We now have 3 different numbers that are dancing around here. Eric.
Yeah, it's like I don't know if you've seen the musical Jekyll and Hyde, where there's this whole like sort of ensemble number called Murder, and it's sort of based on the rumors are flying faster than the actual action. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
I believe that was David Hasselhoff's finest moment, as I recall. If you've not seen the recording, it's there's a whole thing to do with hands. It's a thing to behold. Anyway, any additional thoughts that are on point? Okay, we're going to go into Act 4, Scene 4. There's officers, there's the Lord Justice. I'll read the Lord Mayor's one line. I don't think the Lord Mayor says anything else. I could be wrong. All sorts of people enter it. Act 4, Scene 4. Enter 2 officers to prepare the judgment seat.
Come, let's make haste, and we'll prepare this place.
How well, I pray you? What haste more than was wont?
Why, divers lords are come from court today to see the arraignment of this lusty Browne.
Lusty? How lusty? Now he's tame enough, and will be tamer. Oh, a lusty youth, lustily fed and lustily apparelled, lusty in look, in gait, in gallant talk, lusty in wooing and fight, and murdering. And lustily hanged. There's the end of lusty Browne.
Hold your lusty peace. Here come the lords.
Enter the Lord Mayor in the nick of time, Lord Justice and the 4 lords, and 1 clerk and a sheriff. Please it your honours, place yourselves, my lords.
Bring forth the prisoner, and keep silence there. Prepare the indictment, that it may be read.
Browne is brought in.
The bar, George Browne, and hold up thy hand. Thou art here indicted by the name of George Browne, late of London, gentleman, for that thou, upon the 25th day of March, in the 15th year of the reign of our sacred majesty, whom God long preserve, between the hours of 7 and 8 of the clock in the forenoon of the same day, near unto Shooter's Hill, in the county of Kent, lying in wait of purpose and pretended malice, having no fear of God before thine eyes, the persons of George Sanders, gentleman, and John Beane, yeoman, then and there journeying in God's peace and the prince's, feloniously did assault, and with one sword, price 6 shillings, mortally and wilfully in many places, didst wound unto the death against the peace, crown, and dignity of her majesty. How sayest thou to those felonious murders? Art thou guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
The Lord have mercy upon thee, Master Sheriff. The Lord have mercy upon thee. Master Sheriff, ye shall not need to return any jury to pass upon him, for he hath pleaded guilty, and stands convict at the bar, attending his judgment. What canst thou say for thyself, Browne? Why sentence of death should not be pronounced against thee?
Nothing, my lord, but only do beseech these noble men assistance on that bench, and you, my lord, who are to justice sworn, as you will answer at God's judgment seat, to have a care to save the innocent, and, as myself, to let the guilty die. That's Drury's wife and her trusty man, Roger. But if Anne Sanders die, I do protest, as a man dead in law, that she shall have the greatest wrong that e'er had guiltless soul.
She shall have justice, and with favour, Browne.
Assure yourself, Browne, she shall have no wrong.
I humbly thank your lordships.
Hark ye, Browne, what countryman are you born?
Of Ireland and in Dublin.
Have you not a brother called Anthony Browne?
Yes, my lord, whom, as I hear, your lordship keeps close prisoner now in Newgate.
Oh, two bad brothers. God forgive ye both.
Amen, my lord, and you, and all the world.
Attend your sentence.
Presently, my lord, but I have one petition first to make unto those noble men, which on my knees I do beseech them may not be denied.
What is't, George Browne?
I know the law condemns a murderer to be hanged in chains. O good my lords, as you are noble men, let me be buried so soon as I am dead.
Thou shalt, thou shalt. Let not that trouble thee, but hear thy judgment.
Browne, thou art here by law condemned to die, which by thine own confession thou deservest. All men must die, although by diverse means. The manner how is of least moment, but the matter why condemns or justifies. But be of comfort, though the world condemn, yea, though thy conscience sting thee for thy fact, yet God is greater than thy conscience, and he can save whom all the world condemns, if true repentance turn thee to his grace. Thy time is short, therefore spend this thy time in prayer and contemplation of thy end. Labour to die better than thou hast lived. God grant thou mayest. Attend thy judgment now. Thou must go from hence to the place from whence thou camest, from thence to the appointed place of execution, and there be hanged until thou be dead, and thy body after at the prince's pleasure. And so, Lord have mercy upon thee, Browne. Master Sheriff, see execution, and now take him hence, and bring those other prisoners that you have.
My lords, forget not my petitions, save poor Anne Sanders, for she is innocent. And good my lords, let not me hang in chains.
Browne is led out, and Anne Sanders and Drury are brought in.
Farewell, let none of these things trouble thee.
See how he labours to acquit Anne Sanders.
What hath his brother that is in Newgate done?
Notorious felonies in Yorkshire, my lord. Here come the prisoners. Bring them to the bar. Read their indictments. Master Sheriff, prepare your jury ready. Command silence there.
But before we get to the more trial-y part of the trial, that was a straightforward plea and sentencing. Let's just take in that. Browne is very keen on his body post-execution being decently buried straight away, rather than being left out on display for all to see. Well, I mean, they sort of say that's let that not trouble thee. That's because it's at the prince's pleasure. It's not really our job what happens after you're dead. We just make sure you're dead. So it sort of sounds like it could have been nice, but it isn't actually. It's like, sorry, computer says no. I can't give an answer to that. But yeah, and he's got a brother who's also in prison. And we've been giving him the wrong accent all along because he's not just been to Ireland. He is actually of Ireland, so he's actually
Yes, I
Irish.
suddenly realised I should have been trying an Irish accent. I'm not sure I'm up for it.
Accents are not easy to do.
I can only really do RP.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing. We've been reading it for 2.5 sessions, and we hadn't actually clocked these.
I'm trying to look lusty.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do that.
Lusty. He's very lusty. That second officer, that's as close to a clown part as we've had for quite a while. Sarah, then Alan.
I am slightly disappointed that we're only just hearing about this brother now.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been nice if there'd at least been a reference to it earlier on. You know, maybe when he was having a conversation with Mistress Drury. Obviously, he wasn't going to mention the fact that he had a brother in Newgate to Anne Sanders, but it would have just been nice if that seed had been planted, because now the fact that they're talking about it so much, I'm thinking, well, this is obviously important that this is mentioned, but it's like, why are we only hearing about it now?
I think it would have got in the way. I mean, it is probably just a set up for a single scene moment thing. He said, like he hasn't read ahead at all. You know, it's not, I think, vitally important information. It's just a sort of thematic thing that you know, they're wrong-uns. They were all wrong-uns. That might be a thing. I don't know yet, actually. Alan, then Lynn.
Yeah, I must admit the plea not to be hung in chains struck me as being a futile bit of plea bargaining, because it's not actually achieving anything useful at all.
Well, you know, he wants to be buried in a Christian fashion.
He's trying to save his soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of admitted he's murdering. Now he's doing his whole "I'm going to die" kind of as nobly as I can number. You know, when you realise the game's up, you might as well go out blazing.
Yeah. Lynn.
Yeah, the detail of the brother is very odd because he's not in Newgate. Incarceration was not a punishment in this period, so you could be confined until you paid off your debts. But if he's actually being held for notorious felonies, he's awaiting judgment. They're going to mutilate him. They're going to fine him. They're going to execute him. The incarceration itself is not the punishment. So he's not serving time for something that he's done. So that's actually still up in the air. That hasn't been resolved.
Yeah, so presumably, actually, he didn't know his brother was in town doing felonies, and you know, he's just got back, and it's just one of those coincidences that makes life interesting. That his brother just happens to be in Newgate at the same time. I mean, they could be cell buddies. Who knows? Eric.
Yeah, I was just going to say that hanging in chains is quite cruel and sort of, you know, disturbing in many ways. I don't know how much detail I need to go into on that one. Yeah, so I can understand kind of why he wants to avoid that, but also I think because he insists so much on Anne Sanders being innocent, they're obviously not going to... It's kind of like them trying to take all the burden of it on himself, but it's probably not going to save her.
He's trying to do at least one noble thing, you know, just making clear, demarcating who did what. You know, that's reasonable. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you know, he's just going to be hanged. I mean, he could have had a far worse sentence. You know, they could do worse things to you. At least being hanged in chains is sort of a post-mortem thing. You know, he won't feel it. So anyway, let us go on with the trial part of the trial. Anne Sanders hath a white rose in her bosom.
Anne Sanders and Anne Drury, to the bar and hold up your hands. You are here jointly and severally indicted in form following, viz. that you, Anne Sanders and Anne Drury, late of London, spinsters, and thou, Roger Clement, late of the same, yeoman, and every one of you, jointly and severally, before and after the 25th day of March last past, in the 15th year of the reign of her sacred majesty, whom God long preserve, having not the fear of God before your eyes, did maliciously conspire and conclude with one George Browne, gent, death of George Sanders, late husband to you, Anne Sanders, and did entice, animate, and procure the same George Browne to murder the said Master Saunders. And also, after the said heinous murder committed, did with money and other means aid, relieve, and abet the said Browne, knowing him to have done the deed, whereby you are all accessories, both before and after the fact, contrary to the peace, crown, and dignity of our sovereign lady the Queen. How say ye severally? Are ye guilty or not guilty, as accessories both before and after this felony and murder?
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
How will ye be tried?
By God.
By God and by the
country.
country.
Bring forth trustee Roger there.
Roger is brought in.
Roger, what sayest thou to this letter? Who gave it thee to carry unto Browne?
My mistress gave it me, and she did write it on Our Lady's Eve.
Did Mistress Sanders know thereof, or no?
She read it twice before the same was sealed.
Did I, thou wicked man? This man is hired to betray my life.
Fie, Mistress Saunders, you do not well to use such speeches when you see the case is too manifest. But I pray you, why do you wear that white rose in your bosom?
In token of my spotless innocence, as free from guilt as is this flower from stain.
I fear it will not fall out so.
Roger, what money carried you to Browne after the deed? Get him gone withal?
£26, which coin was borrowed, part of my mistress' plate, and some of Mistress Saunders.
What say ye to that, Mistress Sanders?
Indeed, I grant I missed some of my plate, and now I'm glad I know the thief that stole it.
God forgive ye. You did give it me, and God forgive me, I did love ye all too well, which you know I dearly answer for.
And Drury, what says you? Was not the plate, part of it yours, and the rest Mistress Sanders, according as your man hath here confessed, with which he borrowed £20 for Browne?
Oh, we've lost Drury for a moment there. Lynn, could you step in and be Drury for a moment? Oh
My
no,
lord-
Drury returns. But could you read Third Lord in just a second? Because we seem to have lost Fourth Lord for a while. Drury just returning to the witness box. Yes, with which he borrowed £20 for Browne. Drury. Currently muted.
My lord, it was.
And you and she together were privy of the letter which she sent? Was it so or no? Why do you not speak?
It was, my lord, and Mistress Sanders knew that Roger came the morning ere he went, and had a token from her to George Browne, a handkerchief, which after was sent back, imbrued in Sanders' blood.
Who brought that handkerchief?
That did my man.
To whom did you deliver it, sirrah?
Saunders at her house, my lord.
God, my lords, he openly belies me. I kept my childbed chamber at that time, where 'twas not meet that he or any man should have access.
Go to, flog not your soul with new additions of more heinous sin. 'Tis thought, beside conspiring of his death, you wronged your husband with unchaste behaviour, for which the justice of the righteous God, meaning to strike you, yet reserves a place of gracious mercy, if you can repent. and therefore bring your wickedness to light, that, suffering for it in this world, you might upon your hearty sorrow be set free and fear no further judgment in the next. But if you spurn at his affliction and bear his chastisement with grudging minds, your precious soul, as well as here your bodies, are left in hazard of eternal death. Be sorry, therefore. 'Tis no petty sin, but murder, most unnatural of all, wherewith your hands are tainted, and in which before and after the accursed fact you stand as accessory. To be brief, you shall be carried back unto the place from whence you came, and so from thence at last unto the place of execution, where you shall, all three, be hanged till you be dead. And so the Lord have mercy on your souls.
Oh, good my lords, be good unto Aunt Sanders, or else you cast away an innocent.
It should not seem so by the rose you wear. His colour now is of another hue.
So you will have it. But my soul is still as free from murder as it was at first.
I think no less. Jailer, away with them.
Well, well, Anne Drury. I may curse the time that ere I saw thee, thou brought'st me to this.
I will not curse. But God forgive ye both. Had I never known nor you nor her, I had not come unto this shameful death.
And they exit. It's interesting because Roger's technically telling the truth. And as far as we know, I mean, we didn't see Anne hand him the money, but he did report to Drury that she gave me the money to assist escape, and she did know after the fact that and had sort of after the fact didn't go to the justices, didn't dob them in it, was complicit after the fact. If not, we could argue how complicit she is before the fact. But yeah, in the sense, Roger is being terribly honest here, as far as he knows. He's not lying, per se. Sarah?
Being trusty. It also, the thing about the handkerchief, I mean, that's quite cleverly structured, because we don't know if she actually received the handkerchief, but what we do know is that Browne, after the murder, gives him the handkerchief and says, take this to Anne Sanders. So even if she didn't actually receive it, he was certainly giving it to be delivered to her. Therefore, she wouldn't have been surprised by it. The inference is that she might have been expecting it, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's clever, because it's like we don't actually. Maybe she was in childbed, you know, but there is the inference there that even if she didn't get it, she wouldn't have been surprised if she had. So I just wanted to say, though, I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't hear more from Anne Drury in this scene, because she was such an interesting and vibrant and slightly scary character early on. I would have liked a little bit more from her.
Yes, the focus has sort of lifted from Drury. Maybe we'll get some late onset Drury later on. We shall see. Lynn?
Yeah, what I find really interesting is this play is kind of trying to have it both ways in its view of justice and guilt, because there was that little throwaway scene a couple of scenes ago where the people left on stage talking about, oh, you know, I heard about this murder and that person almost got away with it, but this happened. The person's like, oh yeah, I heard a story about this other murder. The person almost got away with it, but this happened. So there's like 3 stories about how murder will out, right? How somehow justice always ends up being served. And a lot of this play seems concerned with telling us that you can't get away with it. And the people in the institutional, the representatives of the institution are basically good people. The justices and the lords all seem like diligent. They're good people. So, you know, on the one hand, the play seems to be telling us that justice will be served. You can't get away with it. That the good people are going to get justice. But then it's really unclear in this scene how guilty is Anne Sanders. She keeps saying, I'm innocent, I'm completely innocent. We know she's not completely innocent, but we still don't know how much she knew when. So it's kind of complicating that message of justice will be served by being so unclear on how involved Anne was. Super
Yeah.
interesting.
It's a question also of would the justice system do her any favors if she was completely honest about where she was in everything. It doesn't seem like it's a very flexible justice system. It's basically you're guilty and death. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's just sort of how it comes across. And yeah, those stories about the other murders, at least one of them is very familiar to me from something else. I don't know whether it's from this, and I've just heard it from this in another context, but there's something to dig into there. Eric.
I was just going to mention that I find it interesting that sort of, it's gray area for Anne, but then also kind of Roger is the one who sort of had this idea of, we have to scam her out of her money kind of thing. We have to sort of do this whole thing at the beginning, but then he isn't smart enough to sort of go, we're going to end up dead if we're not careful.
I want to know how old Trusty Roger is, because that also makes a massive difference. If he's if he's quite young, or whether he's an older servant. As to how involved and how complicit he can be as well. Lynn, then Alan.
We have one hint about that. He says he served man and boy, which is kind of a formulaic phrase, so it might not be literally true. So man and boy these 7 years. Even if we consider a boy to be 16 or 17, if you add 7 years to that, he can't be, he's not 30, So I don't think he's a mature character.
But, he could be, he could... Well, I wouldn't say man and boy. He could, 7 would be he'd be that young, but he could be surprisingly young. I suspect he isn't, just simply because of the number of female characters we've got in the cast. But it's possible. Alan,
I must admit that from what Lynn's just said in the discussion we had the other day, I've put Roger as being early 20s, but I think he's actually probably the most adept of a whole raft of conmen or confidence tricksters of both genders that we've seen throughout this play.
I'm not sure that's a very high bar, though.
Well, no, but he's slightly more competent at the confidence stuff than one or two of the others.
I don't think he's doing all the grunt work. He's the one keeping people on point. Drury is definitely the one the best confidence trickster in that sense. The doing all the palmistry etc. last time. Anyway, we should move on. See where
Plum
this
is
is all
gone.
going.
Okay.
Oh, excellent. So Act 4, Scene 5. Enter Master Browne to execution with the sheriff and officers.
Why do you stay me in the way of death? The people's eyes have fed them with my sight. The little babies in the mother's arms have wept for those poor babies, seeing me, that I by my murder have left fatherless, and shrieked and started when I came along, and sadly sighed as when their nurses used to frighten them with some monster when they cry.
You have a brother, Browne, that for murder is lately here committed unto Newgate, and hath obtained that he may speak with you.
Have I a brother that hath done the like? Is there another Browne that hath killed a Sanders? Is it my other self hath done the deed? I am 1,000, every murder is my own self. I am at one time in 1,000 places, and I have slain 1,000 Sanders. In every shire, in every city, and each town, George Sanders is still murdered by George Browne.
Browne's brother is brought forth.
Brother!
Brother, does that mean me? Is there a man will call me brother?
Yes, I will call thee so, and may do it that have a hand as deep in blood as thou.
Brother, I know thee well. Of whence was thine?
Of York he was.
Sanders of London mine. And see I well, England's 2 greatest towns, both filled with murders done by both the Browns.
Then may I rightly challenge thee, a brother. Thou slewest one in the one, I one in the other.
When decide
Just answer the question there, brother.
A month or 5 weeks past.
Hardly to say then.
I feel that Browne is not prepared for death.
It's comparing that. I don't think this is playable. Sorry, this isn't playable.
It's
sorry.
perfectly playable. Just
Okay,
the shock
I
of
will-
the new, that's all.
I know. I kind of. Okay.
Do you want to go back?
Yes, I will. Sorry. Then may I rightly challenge thee, brother? Thou slewest one in the one, I one in the other.
No, hang on, that's my line.
Oh, sorry, that's your one. Sorry.
I can go
Sanders.
from there if you like.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. I'll try and calm down.
Then may I rightly challenge thee, a brother? Thou slewest one in the one, I one in the other.
When didst thou dine?
A month or 5 weeks past.
Hardly to say then, which was done the last. Where shalt thou suffer?
Where I did the fact.
And I here, brother, where I laid my act. Then I see well that it be near or further, that heaven will still take due revenue on murther.
Brother, farewell. I see we both must die. At London you this week, next at York, I.
Two luckless brothers sent both at 1 hour, the one from Newgate, the other from the Tower.
And exit, brother.
Browne, yet at last to satisfy the world, and for a true and certain testimony of thy repentance for this deed committed, now at the hour of death, as thou doest hope to have thy sins forgiven at God's hands, freely confess what yet unto this hour against thy conscience, Browne, thou hast concealed, and Saunders' knowledge of her husband's death.
Have I not made a covenant with her that for the love that I ever bear to her, I will not sell her life by my confession? And shall I now confess it? I am a villain, and I will never do it. Shall it be said Browne proved a recreant? And yet I have a soul. Well, God the rest reveal. I will confess my sins, but this conceal. Upon my death she's guiltless of the fact. Well, much ado had I to bring it out. My conscience scarce would let me utter it. I'm glad 'tis past.
But Browne, it is confessed by Drury's wife that she is guilty, which doth fully prove thou hast no true contrition, but concealest her wickedness, the board unto her sin.
Let her confess what she thinks good. Trouble me no more, good Master Sheriff.
Browne, thy soul knows.
Yea, it does. Pray you be quiet, sir. Vile world, how like a monster come I soiled from thee. How have I wallowed in thy loathsome filth, drunk and besmeared with all my bestial sin. I never spake of God, unless when I have blasphemed his name with monstrous oaths. I never read the scriptures in my life, but did esteem them worse than vanity. I never came in church where God was taught, nor ever to the comfort of my soul took benefit of sacrament or baptism. The Sabbath days I spent in common stews, unthrifty gaming and vile perjuries. I held no man once worthy to be spoke of that went not in some strange disguised attire, or had not fetched some vile monstrous fashion to bring in odious detestable pride. I hated any man that did not do some damned or some hated filthy deed that had been death for virtuous men to hear. Of all the worst that live, I was the worst. Of all the cursed, I the most accursed. All careless men, be warned by my end, and by my fall your wicked lives amend.
And he leaps off the scaffold. Enter a messenger who, by coincidence, is in fact yourself.
Bacula. It is the council's pleasure, Master Sheriff, the body be conveyed to Shooter's Hill and there hung up in chains.
It shall be done.
Oh,
And
darn.
excellent. So, ended up in chains after all. The one thing he didn't want to happen. Yeah, so there's a question in the chat. I think it's a very valid question. Is this put in because it was one of those amazing coincidences in real life and therefore they had to put it in and do something with it? Or is it a thematic thing that they have put in for other reasons? Because it's a weird scene. And because Browne is not... I mean, his brother is obviously very laissez-faire about it all. And it's a really interesting question about how Browne's attitude to his brother is here and how that functions. Sarah?
Yes, a couple of things are whizzing around my head. If it's a theme, I'm not entirely sure what that theme is. Like, oh, you can't trust anybody called Browne. If one brother murders somebody, look out for the other one. I mean, none of these themes quite make sense. So if it is for a theme, I'm slightly confused as to what that theme is. But then maybe other more intellectual people than me can come up with one. The other thing I was going to say was just picking up on what I said in the second session about Browne being the sort of person who just really gets into the idea of himself. You know, I was talking on Tuesday about how, to begin with, he's really into the idea of himself as a lover, you know, a seducer wooing another man's wife, even though he turns out to be completely crap at it. Then he's really into the idea of himself as a villain and a murderer, even though he turns out to be completely crap at that as well, because not only does he fail twice, when he does then finally murder the guy he's supposed to murder, he doesn't actually finish off, you know, his companion, which is how he ends up in this position. And now it seems to me that he's really into the idea of playing the sort of tragic, penitent, you know, I was going to say Byronic, but obviously that's not right because that's not for another 300 years. But like, you know, that idea of himself as like this kind of, you know, noble in death. Yes, I have sinned, but I am noble, I am penitent. I hold myself up as an example to you all before he leaps, you know, from the scaffold. And it's just like, okay, he's actually managed to do this one right. Because finally.
What a poser.
Yeah.
We had a lot of posing energy the other day, absolutely. Lynn?
Yeah, I was going to kind of meditate on this at Final Thoughts, but since Sarah's brought it up, we're talking about the brother. And I find it very noticeable that this play has so much doubling and doppelgangers, but the fixer and the object of the man's affections are both Anne. The murderer and the victim are both named George, which I didn't really pick up on in the beginning. The murderer has a distant relation, or at least someone who has the same name, Browne, that he has a kind of friendship with. Turns out he has a brother who is also a murderer. And the rhyming, as I guess Lalitte was pointing out, there's something kind of uncanny and a little queasy about all this echoing. And you know, so what does that mean? Is that thematic or is that just aesthetic? Is the play trying to say something about that because we could all be that person? You see all this doubling, that could be you, that bad person could be you. We have these sort of fuzzy identity edges so I can't really articulate very, very well because I'm only a pseudo intellectual, not a real intellectual. So but yeah, what is it with all this doubling? Is it just to sort of have a creepy effect, or is it is there something sort of moral that it's trying to tell us?
Yeah, it's. Oh, I had a thought. I've lost it. To follow on that, but Rachel was waving, so I'll try and capture it again.
I was just going to say on Sarah's question of if it's theme rather than a writing of history, then what's going on thematically? And all I can think of is just, I mean, at first when there's this funny juxtaposition of these two brothers who both killed people almost on the same night, you sort of, it almost seems as though what we're being told is that George Browne comes from he's a bad lot because he comes from a family of bad lots. And then there's this contrast immediately afterwards when he has this kind of moving speech of great repentance. And so he perhaps becomes his own man in contrast to his brother with this final speech, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because the brother is the one that seems weirdly sing-song and comic, whereas I'm not sure that Browne's dialogue during that is quite that. There's something slightly hollow about it all. And the other thing is that in the run-up to the murder and everything, even as the murder occurs and goes on, is that no one's a villain. No one turns up with a twirly moustache and goes, I'm going to do some murdering today because I'm evil. They are led into a murder by a series of really rubbish choices. So this element at the end of going, are there wrong-uns from the wrong side of the tracks, is sort of contradicting quite a lot of what the play's been doing earlier. Sarah, then Eric, then Aliki.
I think one function of the brother might actually be what Rachel was just talking about there, because he does create such bathos. Like, there's Browne there being all kind of like, oh my God, this is my end and I repent and I am sorry. And then the brother comes on and is like, hi. It's like he's on his phone, while he's talking to him. Like, he's like, oh yeah, you did a murder too. Oh my God, OMG, we both did murders. That's so amazing.
You were wicked.
It's like, yeah, exactly. And it's like, I cannot help but feel that whether it actually happened or not, maybe that scene is there to undercut his tragic persona. So it's like, actually, you're not going to get away with this. This is maybe what you did in real life. Maybe you're on the scaffold, you gave this noble speech, and that's what everyone remembers him for. But it's like the playwright's going, no, actually, we're just going to have a bit of fun with this because at the end of the day, you killed this guy because you wanted to his wife. So, yeah.
And now you're going to hang in chains as well as the
Yeah.
the coder at
that's
the end.
mean.
Yeah.
And because it's that thing, because he has this sort of weird existential moment of going, I am every murderer. And you're going, yeah. And then the brother turns up and goes, hi. Eric.
Yeah, I was starting to wonder whether the brother was actually related to something, because, like, he kind of has this moment of, is there a man to call me brother? And does this elaborate thing of, like, how can you call yourself my brother and stuff? And then it's like, oh yeah, we both killed people. Okay, cool. It's kind of, I guess it's also, I mean, you could take it literally as they are brothers, because he gets asked if he has a brother. And then, but also sort of brothership in terms of same type of person, like thieving or murdering or, type of person, as opposed, which is kind of redundant because, anyway, I won't go into the morality of it.
Yeah. Aliki.
I was thinking along the same lines, both about that moment and the moment with Butcher Browne, are we cousins, are we kin? And with what Lynn was saying about the doubling, maybe the whole thing is in fact that all men are brothers. Beware, it's all too easy for you two to find yourself where this murderer is.
We need to move on, however. One down. Let's a few more executions to go. Act 4, Scene 6. Enter Master James with the Minister.
Why then, you are persuaded, certainly, that Mistress Sanders is a mere innocent?
That am I, sir, even in my very soul. Compare but all the likelihoods thereof. first, her most firm denial of the fact. Next, Mistress Drury's flat confession that only she and Roger did contrive the death of Master Sanders. Then yourself cannot but be of mine opinion.
Then all you labour for is that I should procure her pardon.
To save an innocent is the most Christian work that man can do. Beside, if you perform it, sir, sound recompense shall quit your pains so well employed herein.
Now let me tell you that I am ashamed a man of your profession should appear so far from grace and touch of conscience, as making no respect of his own soul, he should with such audaciousness presume to baffle justice, and abuse the seat with your fond, overweening, and sly fetch. Think you the world discerneth not your drift? Do not I know that if you could prevail by this far-fetched insinuation, and Mistress Sanders' pardon thus obtained, that your intent is then to marry her? And thus you have abused her poor soul, in trusting to so weak and vain a hope. Well, sir, since you have so forgot yourself, and shameless, blush not as so bold at offence upon their day of execution, and at the self-same place upon a pillory there shall you stand, that all the world may see a just desert for such impiety.
Good sir, hear me.
I will not hear thee. Come, and get thee hence, for such a fault too mean a recompense.
So they exit. Thoughts about James and the Minister, Alan?
I must admit I was confused at the outset as to what type of minister this was done, because the opening certainly didn't feel like a minister of religion, but that's what James seems to be addressing him as. So I'm slightly confused with where that bit's going.
Other thoughts in the room? Eric?
Yeah, it reads a lot like all the speeches that we had in Tagra and Gizmundo, where it was kind of like, yes, a woman should die alongside her husband kind of thing, except this is obviously for a different reason.
Sarah?
I assume this is something that did happen, that there was a priest who was put in a pillory near the scaffold, and that this is why this scene is in here, because it actually happened, because otherwise it's just really random. I mean, it's kind of dramatic, but so completely like on a tangent.
Yeah, I mean, how does Master James know that's the case? They certainly have a relaxed standard of evidence in this culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're hot for her, and that's why you're advocating for her. Therefore, you're going to be publicly humiliated. What's your evidence for that?
Have we met this character before?
Nope. This is a totally random interlude.
Whoa. Okay.
It's all right. There are more random interludes to come. So let's compare that with the next one, Act 4, Scene 7. Enter two carpenters meeting.
Tom Pert, my old companion, well met.
Good morrow, Will Crow, good morrow. How dost? I've not seen thee a great while.
Well, I thank God. How dost thou? Where hast thou been this morning so early?
Faith, I've been up ever since 3 o'clock.
About what, man?
Why, to make work for the hangman. I and another have been setting up a gallows.
Oh, for Mistress Drury. Must she die today?
Nay, I know not that. But when she does, I'm sure there is a gallows big enough to hold them both.
Both who? Her man and her.
Sorry. Her man and her, and Mistress Sanders too. 'Tis a swinger in faith. But come, I'll give thee a pot this morning, for I promise thee I am passing dry after my work.
Content, Tom, and I have another for thee, and afterwards I'll go see the execution.
Do as thou wilt for that.
But dost thou think it will be today?
I cannot tell. Smithfield is full of people, and the sheriff's man that set us a work told us it would be today. But come, shall we have this beer?
With a good will. Lead the way.
And they exit. Oh, human life is here. To speak to this, and also just thoughts about the previous scene, is we've been talking about complicity, and how do we judge these people, and also how we keep hearing slightly different accounts of things, that maybe that's a similar game is happening here. I mean, I think there's probably a structural thing, is they want a little bit of a gap between the previous execution and the next execution. So we have two potential scenes. Maybe there's an option, depending which night, which one are you feeling in the mood for? Are either, both of them necessary? But I think they're doing similar games, and I think there's that is a running thread in this, actually, about how that sort of Rashomon quality to it all. It's a nice little scene in its own way. I think we've had people making gallows before somewhere. It seems to ring a bell. Wouldn't be the first one we've met. Sarah.
We had quite a long and involved scene with, not gallows makers, but crucifixion cross makers, didn't we? In that play that was performed by nuns. I remember there was moons ago. There was quite a good scene with the carpenters in that, and it was really technical about the actual carpentry. I found that second scene far less random than the first one, though, because that was like a sort of, this is the populace, these are the multitudes who will actually witness this, and this really happened, guys. It's kind of reminding the audience, this is a true story, this all actually happened. But the previous scene with the minister, that really didn't seem to have any point at all, unless that did also actually happen. I'm going to have to go and look this up and see if we have any information about that.
I have been scrolling through the Arthur Goulding's account of it all. I haven't found anything explicitly there. I mean, this is just basically a minister and James having an argument about whether she's guilty or not.
Yeah, but it gets taken to quite an extreme.
Yeah, but James was involved with the case. I mean, I think there's the thing, is he's the one going, no, she's definitely guilty. I was involved, whereas the minister is just some guy.
Yeah. Or is he?
He's just some guy.
Well, he's been plotting to marry her, though, according to James.
No, that's just James going weird. All this stuff about the pillory, all that, they're all red herrings. He's just, you don't know. I'm going to win the argument by slandering you. And hopefully you'll go away. Get off Twitter. Go on. So yeah, and in that sense, the two seems almost feel of a pace that this is. Maybe maybe they're. I mean, I'd say they're putting up the gallows while they're having the conversation. If we didn't already have a gallows in the previous scene, that's the other structural thing I'm slightly confused about. Is that there's one execution that it feels slightly out of place. That maybe it should live earlier, but it can't. So there's. Maybe the minister and James scene should live between the trial scene and the Browne execution scene, and then this scene lives between the death and the next death, or something like that. I don't know. I don't think so, because this printing is quite good and seems quite well put together, so it seems unlikely, but it could be. Eric?
I'm not entirely confident about the quality of this gallows set up by Tom, because he can't count. He goes both, and then he means her man and her and Mistress Sanders too. And it's like, nope, that's not how you count, dude. This is just like that. I mean, I know you can probably build stuff, but I mean, yeah, it's worrying.
Okay, let's go into the sort of final furlong, as it were. Act 4, Scene 8. Enter Anne Sanders and her keeper following her.
Called you, Mistress Sanders?
Keeper, I did. I prithee fetch up Mistress Drury to me. I have a great desire to talk with her.
She shall be brought unto you presently.
Exit Keeper.
Oh, God. As I was standing at a grate that looks into the street, I heard men talk. The execution should be done today, and what a pair of gallows were set up, both strong and big enough to hold us all. Which words have struck such terror into my soul as I cannot be quiet till I know whether Nan Drury will be resolved still to clear me of the murder as she promised. And here she comes.
And enter Keeper and Drury.
I prithee, gentle keeper, give us a little leave we may confer of things that dearly do concern our souls.
With all my heart, take time and scope enough.
Exit Keeper.
Now, Mistress Sanders, what's your will with me?
Oh, Mistress Drury, now the hour has come to put your love unto the touch, to try if it be current or but counterfeit. This day it is appointed we must die. How say ye then? Are you still purposed to take the murder upon yourself? Or will you now recant your former words?
Anne Sanders, Anne, 'tis time to turn the leaf and leave dissembling, being so near my death, the like I would advise yourself to do. We have both been notorious vile transgressors, and this is not the way to get remission by joining sin to sin, nor doth agree with godly Christians, but with reprobates, as such to have no taste of any grace. And therefore, for my part, I'll clear my conscience and make the truth apparent to the world.
Will you prove then inconstant to your friend?
Should I, to purchase safety for another, or lengthen out another's temporal life, hazard mine own soul everlastingly, and lose the endless joys of heaven, prepared for such as will confess their sins? No, Mistress Sanders, there's a time of grace, and yet we may obtain forgiveness if we will seek it at our Saviour's hands. But if we willfully shut up our hearts against the Holy Spirit that knocks for entrance, it is not this world's punishment shall serve, nor death of body, but our souls shall live in endless torments of unquenched fire.
Your words amaze me. And although I'll vow I never had intention to confess my heinous sin, that I might escape the world's reproach, yet, God, I give him thanks. Even at this instant, I am strangely changed, and will no longer drive repentance off, nor cloak my guiltiness before the world. And in good time see where the doctor comes, by whom I have been seriously instructed.
Enter Doctor.
Good morrow, Mr. Sanders, and soul's health unto you both. Prepare yourselves for death. The hour is now at hand, and, Mr. Sanders, at length acknowledge and confess your fault, that God may be proportioner to your soul.
Right, Reverend Sir. Not to delude the world, nor longer to abuse your patience, here I confess I am a grievous sinner, and have provoked the heavy wrath of God, not only by consenting to the death of my late husband, but by wicked lust and willful sin, denying of the fault. But now I do repent and hate myself, thinking the punishment prepared for me not half severe enough for my deserts.
Done like a Christian and a child of grace, pleasing to God, to angels, and to men. And doubt not but your soul shall find a place in Abraham's bosom, though your body perish. And Mistress Drury, shrink not from your faith, but valiantly prepare to drink this cup of sour affliction. 'Twill raise up to you a crown of glory in another world.
Good Master Doctor, I am bound to you. My soul was ignorant, blind, and almost choked with this world's vanities. But by your counsel, I am as well resolved to go to death as if I were invited to a banquet. Nay, such assurance have I in the blood of him that died for me, as neither fire, sword, nor torment could retain me from him.
Spoke like a champion of the Holy Cross. Now, Mr. Sanders, let me tell to you, your children, hearing this day was the last that should behold their mother on the earth, have come to have your blessing ere you die, and take their sorrowful farewell of you.
A sorrowful farewell 'twill be indeed to them, poor wretches, whom I have deprived of both the natural succours of their youth. Call them in, and gentle keeper, bring me those books that lie within my chamber window. O Master Doctor, were my breast transparent, that what is figured there might be perceived, now should you see the very image of poor and tottered ruins, and a slain conscience. Here they come, be blind mine eyes with tears, and soul and body now in sunder part.
Her children are brought in. Oh, mother, mother!
Oh, my dear children, I am unworthy of the name of mother.
Turn not your face from us, but ere you die, give us your blessing.
Kneel not unto me. 'Tis I that have deserved to kneel to you. My trespass hath bereft you of a father, a loving father, a kind, careful father. And by that self-same action, that foul deed, your mother likewise is to go from you, leaving you, poor souls, by her offence, a corsie and a scandal to the world. But could my husband and your father hear me, thus humbly at his feet would I fall down and plentiful in tears bewail my fault. Mercy I ask of God, of him and you, and of his kindred which I have abused, and of my friends and kindred wheresoever, of whom I am ashamed and abashed, and of all men and women in the world, whom by my foul example I have grieved. Though I deserve no pity at their hands, yet I beseech them all to pardon me, and God I thank, that hath found out my sin and brought me to affliction in this world, thereby to save me in the world to come. O children, learn by your mother's fall to follow virtue and beware of sin, whose baits are sweet and pleasing to the eye, but being tainted more infect than poison and are far bitterer than gall itself, and lived in days where you have wealth at will, as I once had, and are well matched beside. Content yourselves and surfeit not on pride.
Enter Sheriff, bringing in trusty Roger with halberds.
What, Master Doctor, have you made an end? The morning is far spent. Time to go.
Even when you will, Master Sheriff, we are ready.
Behold, my children, I will not bequeath or gold or silver to you. You are left sufficiently provided in that point. But here I give to each of you a book of holy meditations, Bradford's works, that virtuous chosen servant of the Lord. Therein you shall be richer than with gold, safer than in fair buildings, happier than all the pleasures of this world can make you. Sleep not without them when you go to bed, and rise a mornings with them in your hands. So God send down his blessing on you all. Farewell, 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 farewell.
And she kisses them one after another.
Sorry. Nay, stay not to disturb me with your tears. The time is come, sweethearts, and we must part. That way go you, this way my heavy heart.
And they exit. The epilogue is tragedy. Tragedy enters to conclude.
Here are the lances that have sliced forth sin and ripped the venomed ulcer of foul lust, which, being by due vengeance qualified, here tragedy of force must needs conclude. Perhaps it may seem strange unto you all that one hath not revenged another's death after the observation of such course. The reason is that now of truth I sing, and should I add or else diminish aught, many of these spectators then could say I have committed error in my play. Bear with this true and home-born tragedy, yielding so slender argument and scope to build a matter of importance on, and in such form as haply you expected. What now hath failed, tomorrow you shall see performed by history or comedy.
Exit tragedy. Budum ching. Right. So, they confess in the end and say goodbye to the children. Always a good move to tug on the heartstrings there. Bring on a gaggle of children, and it doesn't matter how it ends. Then it's just children, mother dying. They have got some money, so they'll be all right for money. And they've got reading material, so the journey back in the car, or that'll be kept busy. So, thoughts on the room, Lynn?
Yeah, that aged well. Sorry. I have a feeling that it's perhaps a function of cultural changes since this play was published. But yeah, Anne Drury, who was so completely self-serving and amoral just an hour ago, is now an expert in theology. I'm afraid I find this whole scene singularly unpersuasive.
Well, it's the 1590s. I mean, can we really, set in the 1570s or so? So historical
Maybe
setting, if even then. So
does the play really have any choice but to end like this? But yeah, a modern audience it would be really hard to do this. I think convincingly to have them buy it, and it's like, oh, you all must be better people.
But there were children.
Yeah,
Look at the children and their mothers dying. They're going to, and it really, Aliki.
Yeah, I have to agree. Affectingly as it was read by Rachel, I think unless you genuinely believe in the immortality of the soul, which some people do, I know, but probably a lot fewer than then, it's really hard to take this whole deathbed repentance from everybody for the sake of their souls. And the weirdly specific reading recommendation, it's all right, read this book and you will never lust after the wrong person and plot murder, is very jarring.
Desperately trying to give the best good impression to their kids. It's not like they're saying it to adults. As it were.
It's not even read your Bible.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on these people who are going to die in an age when people believed in God, by decree. Sarah.
I think possibly one way you could do this is to really pull out, as much as it's there, pull out the theme of hypocrisy and self-righteousness that's going on here, because the majority of your audience today probably wouldn't believe in the afterlife, wouldn't find that final scene terribly persuasive from that perspective. But what they probably could relate it to is fundamentalism of any stripe, any kind of religion, and the kind of self-righteous conviction that I am absolutely right that comes along with that. Because, I mean, whether Anne Sanders is how involved she is or not, and at the end she confesses, oh yes, I've gone to my death, but how much of that is gaslighting taking effect on her, because Drury said, oh well, you're as guilty as I am. Oh yes I am. Actually, is she? Because going back to the beginning of this play, she was very much the instigator of this whole plot. And I know you said on Tuesday, Rob, that maybe she didn't quite fully understand the consequences of what she was plotting. It was like, oh yeah, the best way to get rid of him is to actually murder him, and she hadn't really followed it through. Whether that's the case or not, she was without doubt the instigator. She was the one who set this up, came up with the idea in the first place, and now she is the one saying to Anne Sanders, oh no, you don't want to, you really don't want to go down this path, love. You need to confess, because I've confessed and I am righteous, and I'm not going to sacrifice my soul for you. Lady, I'm not going to save your life, because I am now righteous. And I think maybe that is the way you could key into this scene for a modern audience, because it is like that half of the scene before the children come on is actually quite jaw-dropping when you remember back to how she was. I know we've done this over 4 days, but for an audience who like an hour beforehand have seen her doing what she was doing, I think that could be create quite an impact.
Other thoughts? Death.
I mean, the doctor was so quick to grant, all you had to do was like one confession, like, all right, your soul's going to be okay. And that's just weird. I mean, it's.
No, he's not going
I
to
know
hang.
it happens a
He's
lot,
not going
but-
to hang around in prison.
No.
He's done this before. You can tell.
But
Yeah.
that's sort of the Christian paradox, is that all you need to be genuinely repentant and surrender yourself to God. And even in the Catholic model, as long as you are genuinely sorry at the moment of your death, you may spend some time in purgatory, and that's not fun. But that's what it takes in Christian theology. I mean, in Dante, purgatory is a happy place. Nobody flunks purgatory. So even if you're going to suffer for your sins on the Catholic theological model, that it's a pivot. It's like, are you sorry really in your heart? God forgives you. That's how Christianity works.
Other thoughts before we go around the room for final thoughts for this last session? Eric.
I think this scene, it has similar, like, it reminds me a lot of the last scene of the Insatiate Countess, which, okay, is obviously a very different play. It has very different sort of direction, but it has that thing of like an unsatisfying ending if you're not into the whole confession thing. And a lot of us are kind of sitting here going, but she didn't do anything, or just because someone else instigated it doesn't necessarily mean that she did it. She, just because she knew about it doesn't mean she sort of was an accomplice, kind of thing. Also, I'm thinking that if she had tried to confess as soon as she found out, it would have been like, okay, what part did you play in this? Because she's a woman in a time where women are not believed, and they're still not believed in many cases. In, I don't know, probably a very high percentage of cases. But like you can see how this would be basically a woman against Anne Saunders against the justice system. So yeah, it's kind of very, I don't know. You could play it that way in terms of her performance, but the thing is, getting the religious stuff in and out seems a bit excessive. I don't know. At least for a modern audience. But then you could play it in as a sort of. You could also do it in reverse if you want. Sort of just have the confessions at the end and have people work out the clues.
Well, I mean, there are other things at play potentially here as well. In terms of, it may play better for her children as well. She's been convicted. There is no, she's going to die. There is no way out. And also confessing at this stage, that it doesn't seem out of character for Anne to be confessing or doing any of this necessarily. I do agree on the Drury sense of it does seem a little disingenuous, and maybe we can play it as disingenuous. But that's one to play around in performance. But none of this is unexpected. I didn't expect it to go any other particular direction than this. And for a play that is set in the past and is now very much even further in the past, are we expecting too much from these people? But that's a question now as we consider performance and the play overall for those who've been here all the way through. Final thoughts about the play as a whole. Alan, any final thoughts?
I must admit, I sort of began to lose interest from about scene 4.5, Act 4, scene 5 onwards, when it sort of suddenly did this screeching handbrake turn into a morality play, a big religious tract. It seemed to change character very much at that stage. And a lot of the material between there and the end just didn't seem to add much to anything, in my view. Previously, I thought it had worked incredibly well.
I don't think the amount of religiosity in the play has actually actively increased. It's just the stakes have got higher. We've had a fair amount of moralising throughout the play. We were discussing it as a moral play last session.
Yeah, but I think they actually used a bigger mallet in the last section, which
I say when you're going to die, there is no other option. There is no other switch for this kind of play. Aliki, you've not been here for the rest of the play. Any final thoughts from you?
I don't see how I can really comment. I wish I had been here for the rest of the play, and that's really it. I mean, I'm not going to hammer home my objection to the religiosity. I think we've all made it very clear, but I'm intrigued by Sarah's point that it could be played up as a theme of hypocrisy. But I've talked a lot for somebody who's got nothing to say.
Fair enough. Rachel, any final thoughts? You've been here for a reasonable percentage, about 2/3. You missed the very opening. How are you finding the ending?
I'm not sure, so I'm afraid I don't have anything clever to say. I'm still mulling it. I quite liked what you said about Anne Drury and how that could be played, because it could just be that she's damned if she's the only one who's going to hang, so she pretends to be all pious just so as to go back on her promise to Anne. But yeah, I'm not sure what I think overall. I think it's playable somehow.
I think it's perfectly playable. I think everyone's making mountains out of molehills here. It was always going to end this way.
Yeah.
It was always going to end this way. There are some weird bits in it. I'm not saying it's perfect, but you know, I'm finding this reaction very strange. But that's why we do it. Eric.
Yeah, I was going to say that, like, technically, if you play this alongside Arden and Faversham, it's exactly the same plot, just different names and different sort of situation, because you do end up with a woman in that one who is hanged, who isn't actually complicit in the murders. Yeah, you get the brother who, I mean, in Arden, you could do a whole season of, like, true crime from, you know, early modern stuff, if you really wanted, which would be kind of very interesting to see, you know, alongside things that are not crime, or like not true crime. I mean. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a fascinating play in terms of where you can put it, and what you can do with it. I mean, I guess there are scenes that you can cut, of course, and speeches that you can cut. But yeah, there's a part of me going, maybe true crime is the only way to present it, because you can't really, yeah, there's nothing else you could do with it. I don't know, maybe.
I definitely think true crime is the obvious marker, because you can place it with things like Two Lamentable Tragedies and Arden, but it's it's not excessively long. I mean, there are cuts to be made, but it's not like it's one of those scripts where you're going, okay, there's several thousand words too many for a comfortable arse to survive. Lynn, any final thoughts?
Yes, I'm super intrigued by Sarah's interpretive tactic of Anne Drury is still a hypocrite. And if you could play it so that Anne Sanders buys it, she believes Drury, but we as the audience don't. I think that would be super interesting if you could make that work. And I'm looking at the last two lines of the epilogue where tragedy says, "What now hath failed, tomorrow you shall see performed by history or comedy." So if this tragedy doesn't work for you, there's a history spin on it and a comedy spin on it. This isn't the only way to interpret these events.
Yes, let's swap out the chorus with one where it's comedy's turn now. Let's do the whole thing as a farce, which it almost is.
The implication is, this would be the tragical way of reading these events, but there are other ways of reading them. I do agree with Alan, though, that in the overall shape of the play, it takes too long to get from the murderer's confession and execution to the end of the play, just in terms of the way the action, the overall shape of it. it just seems to drag. So that's where you want to look at kind of speeding up the action. And one last little sort of mental connection I made is I'm thinking back, I think The Witch of Edmonton, where in the end the witch says, okay, yes, I am sorry for what I did, but all y'all can go F yourselves. and that's so different from Anne's exit from this life. It strikes me as like, boy, that was really a very audacious and subversive move to have the witch say that, okay, I confess, I'm going to try to right my relationship with God, but society is still really screwed up and you all know it. It was interesting.
Lalitte.
Yeah, I'm wondering why it's called A Warning to Fair Women and not A Warning to Lusty Men, but maybe we just have to kind of accept that one.
The title is an issue.
Yeah. I think this mixed genre thing could work because, the fact that, I suddenly couldn't get over the giggles in the scene with the brother because it was also incongruous. You just had these two tones going on that was so different that they were just hilariously funny. And I don't know how much that is true of the rest of the play. In terms of being moved by death, I have to admit I was much more moved by the double tragedy when Rachel and her brother, kind of humbler people sort of got done and hanged. And that somehow was more real, I remember. I might have just got jaded with so many gallows between then and now.
I have to say the brother is quite excisable in the overall scheme of things. So yeah, maybe that's an option. Eric, any final thoughts?
I gave my final thoughts, but I just feel kind of bad that like Joan didn't get her sort of boyfriend on board because basically Beane died. And we were all kind of going, we hope he survives to be with Joan. That one good thing will come of this. But it did not.
No, poor Joan. Maybe we should substitute Joan for James in that scene, at the deathbed scene for Beane. Because it'd be nice to see Joan again after the first half. I mean, that scene of the death, almost in James's arms. It sort of explains his reaction to the minister later on. Basically, there's something really interesting there that maybe just needs slight moving around and tinkering with. Because there's something quite fast-paced about the way that we go from a number of relatively short scenes that potentially actually between two quite relatively slow ones. So there's an interesting series of pacing decisions that seem to be going on here. And considering we go through the entire court proceedings, we don't often get that. The people get sentenced to death and then they die. This is doing a sort of Crown Court thing of we're going to show you how actually they went through the process. It was all perfectly fair. You may not agree with it, or you may, but that's how it went down. Any more for any more? We got a couple of minutes in lieu. I've got an additional thing to add in a moment, but Sarah.
I haven't had final thoughts.
Oh, have you not?
Can I have final thoughts, please?
It's because you're not down on my thing as you're not officially a person, you see.
It's been said before.
All the people have swapped around, so it all got very confusing.
Because I have many final thoughts, actually. Firstly, I'm wondering if, for a modern audience, you should call this the most lamentable murder of Master George Sanders of London.
It's a better title, isn't it?
It's a better title for a modern audience, especially if you're going to put it into a true crime season, which seems like a very good idea. Secondly, I think it's eminently playable, this. I have really enjoyed reading it, which is ironic because I'm not a fan of true crime. I am, however, a fan of courtroom drama. And I think that trial sequence that, Alan was saying that today lagged a bit. I think if you were to play that with, obviously with rehearsal and direction, if it was played with verve and really given a sort of modern courtroom drama cast, when I say cast, I don't mean a cast of players, I mean like a shade, a tone to it. I think it would actually spring to life. I love the ambiguity in it. I think if there are points, if you play up that ambiguity and that thing that you came up with, Rob, of like, what is the truth here? It's like, this is the tabloid version, this is the broadsheet version. This is what the people on the ground are saying. This is what the politicians are saying. This is what the people in charge are saying. This is what the actual people who are involved were saying. I think that you could really play that up and relate that to a modern audience, and it would be enjoyable. So I think there's a lot of potential with this. And I also think, going back to the first session, I mentioned that with that really fantastic opening of history, comedy and tragedy, and how you could play tragedy as a goth. I'm now actually thinking one of the children at the end, maybe perhaps Anne Sanders' oldest child, should maybe be cast as tragedy, and maybe they could be kind of sort of gothically masked up to begin with, so that you're not aware by the time we get to the scene at the end that it's the same person. But I think it would be really quite electrifying if one of the children, and we've always got this thing of like, oh, it's little children crying around their mummy, but actually if you actually played that scene where these children are so deeply traumatized by what's going on, and then one of them turns to the audience and turns into the figure of tragedy, I think you're going to have a slam bang finish, actually.
It's Alicia Witt in David Lynch's Dune, isn't it? You're going for as a look, aren't you?
I haven't seen Dune yet. Everyone's talking about
the David Lynch one.
Oh, I haven't seen that either.
Yeah, tiny, terrifying child with magical powers. Basically,
okay.
It's
maybe that's
it's a quite freaky edition.
Why not? Why not do that? But I just think there is mileage to be had in that. I also loved Lynn's idea, thought, because those last two lines I read as being, if you didn't like today's tragedy, you can come back tomorrow and see a history or a comedy. But actually, if you read it as, if you don't like this particular telling of the story, come and see it played as a history, or the same story played as a comedy. I think that's amazing concept, and it totally ties in with this idea of, how do you take these things? Even though this is a true story, what is the truth? How do you read it? Everyone's going to have a different interpretation. Everyone's going to feel justified to have in their own opinion and what they think is right, which again ties into the character of Drury. I think there's so much you could do with this.
I mean, I think over the three sessions, barring a few moments, this is a cracking play. I've really enjoyed it. Just a little bit. I have been scrolling, desperately scrolling through Arthur Golding's account, and so broadly speaking, Anne's confession at the end is from history. In the sense they couldn't sidestep that. I haven't found any real reference to anything from Drury. And it might be that that's also a reason why Drury goes out of focus from once the crime has been committed, that they haven't necessarily got any data to be working from. I mean, that's obviously the reason I didn't bring any of this up, because I've only just literally vaguely scrolled through it now, but B, also to just judge the play on its own merits. And there's obviously a little disappointment in the end of the play, but I think it's fixable. And I think there's a lot of stuff. And as I say, if there's additional material that we can add, you never know, there might be ballads. We've had this conversation before about, are there music things that we can use and stuff. And also Lynn brought up the other day, that question of do we want to do a version where we don't have the tragedy comedy material? Do we just look at it as a straight play, and whether that changes what the play is and what the play is doing, and we're going for a more realist sort of school of performance, and what happens to the play then? I like multiplicities. I like options. I don't want to say, let's just do it in original costume and just whack it on a stage. I want to say you can do it how you like. You can cut the brother. You can not cut the brother. You can cut that. You can do that. You can do it all exactly as writ. Without changing a thing. Who knows? It's
You
entirely
could
up
do
to
it
you.
as a
Eric.
You could do it as a choose your own crime version if you wanted. Sort of choose your own adventure kind of thing.
Choose your own
but yeah.
adventure. Toss a coin at the beginning. No, roll a dice at the beginning. Comedy, tragedy, or history? And
Presumably
see.
there isn't a comedy or history version of this, though.
not that we know of. I think it's more that the next play in Rep will probably be a comedy or a history, odds on, and they would probably know by that point what the next day's play would be, and probably the next few days' play would be.
Doesn't mean you couldn't do them though.
No, that's true.
You could take maybe leave some part of the text out for the history version and leave some part of the text out for the comedy version. I mean, all of that first day was read so much like a city comedy. You could then turn this into a really dark farce.
And as we've discovered recently, you can murder people and find it hilarious. So it's entirely possible. So anyway, we're well beyond extra time. All that remains is to thank all these wonderful people for all their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. Lusty in wooing, in fighting and murdering.